This is the second video in this tutorial dealing with this model from MakeHuman in Blender. And in the first video we had a look at an online tutorial at how to attach our materials and texture mappings onto our model. And just to recap the state that we want our model in, we want to have 4 parts: a body, eyes, teeth, and tongue. The tongue and teeth were separate items. The eyes consist of the eyes and the iris joined together, and the body consists of the body, head, eyebrows, and eyelashes, and those parts were joined and the doubles were removed on those objects. In this video we're going to put some quick clothing onto our model, so we'll go into edit mode, go into faces and select all, look at her from a side view, and deselect the areas that we do not want to be parts of the clothing. So I'll just do that, and I want to consider a couple things while I'm choosing the edge of her clothes. What I want to avoid is having the edges of the clothing land in areas with a lot of rotation. And I want to try to pick areas that have a nice continuous cut to them. And some areas that's not going to be possible in. So we'll just do the best that we can with it. So I'll deselect anywhere that I figure I want the clothes to be. Not to be, I should say. And I'll try to stay away from placing the clothing in areas where there's too much rotation. So I'll rotate around and have a look at my selections and see that they're continuous lines and that they're away from the joints so that I don't run into any issues with my clothing passing into the mesh when it rotates. With my selection made, I'll shift duplicate it, drop it where it's at, and use the P key to separate selected. Tab into object mode and select the new object, and I'm going to move that to an empty layer so it's easier to see. So we'll jump over to that layer and erase all of the materials off of it. So I'll delete those. Tab into edit mode and add a new material. Go into the materials button, set up a quick material. I'm not going to do anything special with this material, so I'm not going to use any textures or anything, but I will reduce the specularity and hard so that it's a matte color and it isn't all glossy. With my material set on to the model, I can start my edits to it. I'll go into vertices and deselect all. And what I want to do is select the edges of each of these limbs and the neck and expand them a bit. So I'll scale them up a bit. So I'll box select those axes, or brush select I should say. Scale them by 1.2 just to make them grow a bit. And in the editing buttons in mesh tools, use an instance of smooth onto those to smooth out that edge a little bit. Deselect that, brush select the next edge, scale it 1.2, smooth it, deselect it, and do the next edge. Brush select that, scale it 1.2, and smooth it. Deselect that, brush select the next edge, scale it 1.2, smooth it, and then just do the neck area. Brush select that. And on the neck, I find it's good to double check that selection. Scale that by 1.2. And also on the neck, I like to use a couple instances of smoothing. With that done, I'll tab into object mode and move that back into the first layer. Select the body and take it into edit mode. So tab into edit mode. Now I want to select all the areas of the body that I wish to delete. And how I'll make my selection is I want to stay one row of faces away from the clothing. And what that'll do is give me one row of overlapping vertices. Around the neck, this can be a little more tricky. And one might also want to do this in solid mode where we're not selecting through the item. But if we do it on an angle and watch where our selections are in the background, and we can do it fairly reasonably without too much fuss. And with the one row of faces left in between our selection and the clothing, we'll then be ready to delete it. And I like to check around the model because we don't want to unintentionally delete parts that we want. So it's good to check around the model to double check that selection. Deleting portions of the flesh portion of the model will, we could of course rebuild it, but in the end, it will disrupt the UV mapping. So we don't really want to do that. So I'll erase those vertices, tab back into object mode and select all, use Ctrl J to join the meshes, and then go back into edit mode. I'll select all and remove doubles. That removes 94 doubles. And at this point, I like to have a careful look over my model to see that all as well. So with that done, that's about it for this video. In the next video, we're going to tackle a little bit of hair onto her head and see what that looks like. So let's call up my camera. And do a quick test render. See what that looks like. So we'll render current frame. And there's our model. The little lip of clothing shows fairly nicely with a shadow underneath it. And it's not too overstated. A very simple and quick type of clothing we can just toss onto our model. And that's it for this video. In the next one we'll come back and do a quick bit of hair on her head. So until then, happy modeling.